In the dense, shadowy forests of 16th century Germany, where the light barely penetrated the thick canopy of ancient trees, a name whispered on the wind sent shivers through the hearts of those who heard it: Christman Genipperteinga. His story was infamous, a twisted tale of cruelty, power, and deception. He was a man who had evaded capture for years, terrorizing travelers, robbing merchants, and hiding away in a secret lair that only he could navigate. But what made his legend all the more terrifying was the tragic fate of the young woman who became his bride, a story forever remembered as the honeymoon from hell. Christman Genipperteinga first appeared as a mysterious figure on the edges of a quiet village, charming and disarming. With rugged good looks and a calm, confident manner, he seemed the picture of a dashing traveler, though his true nature lay hidden behind his charming exterior. He had long perfected the art of winning trust, using his charisma to charm his way into people's lives before robbing them of everything they owned. The surrounding forests were filled with rumors, stories of lost travelers, inexplicably empty carriages, and wealthy merchants vanishing without a trace. At first, the villagers could not believe that a man of such charm could be responsible for the horrors they whispered about in hushed tones. But those who encountered Christman alone in the woods knew the truth, though they rarely lived to tell it. He was ruthless, a predator who took joy in the suffering of others, but no one in the village truly knew the depths of his darkness. Not yet. Then came Lena. Lena was young, beautiful, and curious. She was from a neighboring village, and her life had been simple, safe, and confined to the routines of rural life. She was drawn to Christman the moment she first laid eyes on him. Unlike anyone she had met before, he spoke of the world beyond their village, of adventure and wealth, of a life of excitement far removed from the mundane reality she knew. To Lena, he was a mystery wrapped in an allure she could not resist. And to Christman, she was perfect, naive, trusting, and easily enchanted. He wooed her with all the skill he had honed over the years, showering her with attention, gifts, and promises. He told her that together they would live a life of freedom, a life where they would never be confined by rules or limits. He painted a picture so vivid that Lena's heart swelled with longing, and before long she was completely under his spell. They were married in a hasty ceremony, far from prying eyes, and Christman promised her a honeymoon she would never forget. But what Lena didn't know was that her new husband's idea of a honeymoon was nothing like the romantic journey she had imagined. Their journey to Christman's lair was long and grueling, a trek deep into the heart of the Black Forest. Lena was exhausted, but Christman showed no mercy, urging her onward with a cruel gleam in his eye. The further they went, the darker and denser the forest became. Ancient trees loomed above, their twisted branches forming eerie shapes, casting shadows that danced in the dim light. Lena began to feel a growing unease, but she pushed it aside, telling herself that her husband would soon explain everything. She was determined to trust him, convinced that he was leading her to a life of freedom and adventure. When they finally arrived at his hidden lair, Lena's breath caught in her throat. Nestled in a hollowed-out area of the forest, the lair was concealed so well it would be nearly impossible for anyone to stumble upon it by accident. But what struck Lena most was the grim, foreboding air that hung over the place. The building was no more than a crude cabin, surrounded by a tangle of thorny brambles and nearly swallowed by the dense undergrowth. It was not the romantic hideaway she had imagined. It was dark, damp, and oppressive. Inside, the lair was a nightmare. The rooms were filled with remnants of past crimes, stolen treasures, clothing, and even personal trinkets taken from his victims. But the most horrifying discovery was the hidden chamber Lena found one night, filled with shackles, blood-stained walls, and various torture devices. Horror dawned in Lena's eyes as she realized the true nature of her husband. She wanted to run, to scream, but fear paralyzed her, and as if sensing her terror, Christman simply laughed. "Oh, Lena," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Did you think you married a gentleman?" His voice was cruel, cold, devoid of the warmth he had shown her before. The man she had fallen in love with had vanished, replaced by a ruthless monster, and Lena, young and vulnerable, was trapped in his web. Christman reveled in her fear, treating her less as a wife and more as another tool in his dark world. Days turned into weeks, and Lena became a prisoner in her own life. Christman would disappear for days, returning with blood-stained clothes and strange objects that made Lena's skin crawl. She knew better than to ask questions. She had learned the hard way that questioning Christman led to anger, to the point where his punishments left bruises on her skin and fear deep in her heart. She was forced to play along, pretending to accept her new reality, even as she secretly planned to escape. But Christman was cunning, and he made it clear that escape was impossible. He had carefully rigged the lair with traps, hidden deadlocks, and snares designed to ensure that no one would ever escape. Lena's heart sank with each passing day, realizing that she was bound to this monster, trapped in the very life she had once desired so desperately. In her despair, Lena found Christman's logbook, a meticulous record of each victim, each crime, each stolen possession catalogued with cold precision. She read through the names and details, feeling her heart break as she realized the depth of his cruelty. She could almost hear the cries of the people he had murdered, the innocent lives he had destroyed for his own amusement. She realized then that her only hope was to turn the tables on Christman, to somehow gain his trust enough to find a way to escape. She began to feign loyalty, acting as though she was coming to embrace his way of life. She helped him sort through his stolen goods, pretended to listen with fascination as he recounted tales of his twisted conquests. And slowly, Christman began to relax, letting down his guard, convinced that Lena had finally accepted her role by his side. One evening, as they sat by a meager fire, Lena prepared a drink for Christman, lacing it with a sedative she had managed to concoct from herbs she had secretly gathered. She watched him closely as he took a long drink, his eyes growing heavy, his voice slurring. Finally, he slumped forward, unconscious. Lena wasted no time. She bound him with the very chains he had used on his victims, dragging him into the deepest part of the lair. She could feel her heart racing, a mixture of fear and exhilaration as she worked quickly, knowing that this was her one chance to escape. Once she had secured him, Lena fled the lair, running through the forest with all the strength she could muster. She reached the village by dawn, collapsing in exhaustion and terror as she told her story to the horrified townspeople. They listened in shock, but their fear quickly turned to anger. They formed a mob, arming themselves with whatever weapons they could find, and set out to confront Christman once and for all. When they arrived at his lair, they found him still bound, his face twisted in rage and defiance. But for the first time he was helpless. The tables finally turned. Christman Genipperteinga was put on trial, though his guilt was undeniable, and he was sentenced to a painful death. His reign of terror brought to a brutal end. Lena watched as the man who had once stolen her heart, and nearly her life, faced the justice he had evaded for so long. She returned to her village, forever changed, haunted by the horrors she had endured. And the legend of Christman Genipperteinga lived on, a tale of warning for all who ventured into the Black Forest, a reminder of the monsters that sometimes wear the face of a lover.